Clara's knees hit the frozen auction platform as her 3-year-old was ripped from her arms. "Mama!" Tommy screamed, his tiny fingers clawing the air between them. "No! Please, he's just a baby!" She lunged forward, but rough hands shoved her back down. 5 children. They wanted to sell her 5 children separately, like splitting a litter of pups. The auctioneer's gavel rose in the December wind. If you want to see what happens next, stay with me until the end. Subscribe now and comment what city you're watching from. Let me know how far Clara's story travels across this world. Mappa. The auctioneer's gavel rose against the gray December sky, and Clara Thornton stopped breathing. "Now then, folks, we got ourselves a situation here." The man's voice carried across Silver Creek's main street like a death sentence. "Widow Thornton owes the bank $342. Can't pay, so we're settling accounts the legal way." Clara stood on the wooden platform, her 5 children pressed against her thin wool dress. Tommy, barely 3, clung to her neck so tight she could feel his heartbeat against her throat. Hannah, 5, had her face buried in Clara's skirt. Lily, 8, held Grace's hand with white knuckles. And Emma, 14, stood rigid beside her mother, jaw set in that stubborn line that mirrored Clara's own. "Mama?" Emma's whisper was barely audible. "They can't really do this. Can they?" Clara couldn't answer. Couldn't find words for the impossible thing happening to them. $342. The auctioneer slapped his ledger. "Who wants to start the bidding? Strong widow, healthy children. Put 'em to work, and you'll earn that money back in no time." The crowd shifted. 40, maybe 50 people. Ranchers in heavy coats. Shopkeepers with calculating eyes. Women clutching their husbands' arms, watching with the particular hunger of those grateful it wasn't them up there. $10. The first bid came from Silas Murdoch, the tannery owner. Clara had seen him beat his horses until they bled. $10 for the lot. "Come on now, gentlemen. Look at these children. The older girls can cook and clean. The boy'll grow into good labor." 15. Another voice. Clara didn't see who. 20. Murdoch again, his piggy eyes fixed on Emma. 20 for the widow and the oldest girl. You can keep the rest. Clara's blood turned to ice. "Now hold on." The auctioneer frowned. "We're selling them as a unit. Bank's orders." "Bank ain't here." Murdoch stepped forward. "And I ain't paying for 5 brats I don't need. 25 for the woman and the oldest. Final offer." "Mama!" Emma's voice cracked. She was 14 years old. She understood exactly what Murdoch wanted. Clara pulled her daughter behind her. "You touch her, and I'll kill you." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Feisty one," Murdoch grinned. "I like that. $30. But I want the girl included. She's old enough to earn her keep." "I said no." Clara's voice rose. "We stay together. All of us. That was the agreement." "Agreement." The auctioneer scratched his chin. "Ma'am, you ain't in a position to make agreements. Your property now, same as your chattel and your cooking pots. You go where the highest bidder says." "We ain't property." Emma stepped beside her mother. "We're people." 35. Another bidder. A rancher Clara vaguely recognized. "I'll take the 3 youngest. Good age to train up. Don't need the woman or the older girls." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. They were going to split them up. After everything, Samuel's death, losing the house, selling every possession down to her mother's wedding ring, they were going to tear her children apart and sell them to strangers like unwanted livestock. "No." The word came out broken. "No, please. Please don't separate us. I'll work twice as hard. I'll do anything. Just keep us together." The auctioneer sighed like she was a particularly troublesome cow. "Ma'am, that ain't how this works." $40. Murdoch's voice cut through. "Final offer. The widow and the 2 oldest girls. Someone else can have the little ones." Tommy started crying. That high, terrified wail of a child who doesn't understand why the world has become so frightening. Hannah joined him. Then Lily. Grace, 11 years old and too wise for her age, pulled her younger sisters close. Shh, shh, it's okay. Mama's going to fix it. But Clara couldn't fix it. She was standing on an auction block in the snow with 5 hungry children and 3 weeks of grief still fresh in her chest, and she couldn't fix a goddamn thing. 40 going once. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Clara looked at her children. Really looked at them. Emma, who'd taken over the cooking when Clara couldn't get out of bed after Samuel died. Grace, who read stories to the little ones every night to help them sleep. Lily, so shy she barely spoke to anyone outside the family. Hannah, who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. And Tommy, her baby, her last piece of Samuel clinging to her neck like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. If they were separated, she would never see them again. The realization crashed through her with physical force. In the chaos of Western expansion, in the vastness of the territories, separated families simply vanished from each other's lives. No letters could find them. No searches would succeed. They would become strangers to each other, growing up in different houses with different names, and someday they might pass on the street without a flicker of recognition. 40 going twice. Clara opened her mouth to beg, to scream, to offer her own life if they would just keep her children together. $200. The gavel stopped mid-swing. Every head turned toward the voice. He stood at the back of the crowd, nearly invisible in his worn brown coat and low-pulled hat. Tall, broad-shouldered, face shadowed by a week's worth of beard and eyes that gave nothing away. 200, the auctioneer's voice squeaked. Did you say $200? I did. The man stepped forward, and the crowd parted around him like water around stone. $200. For all of them, the widow and all 5 children, together. Silence. Clara stared at him, trying to understand what was happening. $200 was more than most ranchers made in a year. It was an impossible sum for a debt auction in a small Montana town in the middle of December. Now hold on just a minute. Murdoch's face had gone red. Who the hell are you? Jacob Mercer. The name landed like a dropped stone. I own the ranch north of here. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara caught fragments. Mercer place? Wife died years back. Keeps to himself. Ain't right in the head. Mr. Mercer. The auctioneer found his voice. 200 is a generous offer. Very generous. But I need to confirm you can actually pay. Jacob Mercer reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He walked to the platform, climbed the 3 steps, and upended it onto the auctioneer's podium. Gold coins spilled across the wood, more money than Clara had ever seen in one place. Count it, Mercer said. It's all there. The auctioneer's hands shook as he gathered the coins. The crowd had gone absolutely still. Murdoch pushed forward. This ain't right. I bid first. I got rights. You got nothing. Mercer turned to face him, and something in his expression made Murdoch take a step back. Auction's open to highest bidder. I'm the highest bidder. You got a problem with that, we can discuss it elsewhere. The threat hung in the cold air. Murdoch's jaw worked. His hands clenched, but he didn't move forward. $200. The auctioneer's voice was faint. Going once. Going twice. The gavel fell with a crack that echoed off the storefronts. Sold to Mr. Jacob Mercer. Clara's knees nearly gave out. It was over. Someone had bought them. All of them together. But as relief flooded through her, it was quickly chased by fear. She'd been saved from one nightmare. What nightmare had she just been sold into? Mercer turned to face her for the first time. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the careful blankness of his expression, like a man who'd learned to feel nothing because feeling was too dangerous. Mrs. Thornton. His voice was low, rough from disuse. Can your children walk? The question was so practical, so unexpected that Clara blinked. What? Walk. My wagon's at the livery. It's 2 miles. If the little ones can't make it, I can carry one. Clara looked at her children, all 5 of them staring at this stranger who'd just spent a fortune to purchase their family. Yes, yes, they can walk. Good. He started down the platform steps. We should go before the weather turns. Wait. Clara's voice stopped him. Mr. Mercer, why? He didn't turn around. Why what? Why did you do this? Why would you spend $200 on a widow and 5 children you've never met? For a long moment, he didn't answer. The wind picked up swirling snow around their feet. The crowd was dispersing, disappointed of their entertainment, muttering about crazy ranchers and wasted money. Because I could. His voice was flat. And because nobody else would. Then he walked away, leaving Clara to gather her children and follow him into an uncertain future. The walk to the livery stable was silent. Clara kept Tommy in her arms despite his weight, unwilling to let him go. The other children clustered around her, glancing at Mercer's broad back, with expressions ranging from Emma's suspicion to Hannah's open curiosity. The town watched them go. Clara felt the stares like physical weight on her shoulders. Whispers followed them down the street. That's her, the one who got sold. All those children, what's he going to do with them? You don't spend $200 just to be kind. He wants something. Clara tightened her grip on Tommy and kept walking. At the livery Mercer's wagon waited a sturdy work wagon with a canvas cover pulled by 2 patient draft horses. He'd already loaded supplies, flour sacks, a crate of provisions, extra blankets folded on the bench. Get in. He gestured to the wagon bed. It's a 3-hour ride, going to get colder. 3 hours. Emma's voice was sharp. To where? My ranch. Mercer's eyes met hers, and for a moment Clara saw something flicker there. Recognition maybe, or understanding of exactly why a 14-year-old girl would be afraid. It's remote. Good land though. Safe. Safe for who? Emma. Clara's voice held warning. No, Mama. I want to know. Emma stepped forward, chin raised. What do you want from us? Because men don't spend that kind of money for nothing. So what is it? What do you expect? Mercer studied her for a long moment. I expect you to work, he said finally. Your mother too. The ranch needs keeping. I've got cattle to tend, and a house that hasn't had proper care in years. You'll earn your keep through honest labor. He paused. That's all. That's all. That's all. His jaw tightened. I know what you're thinking. I know what that crowd was thinking. But I'm not Murdoch, and I'm not interested in anything except help running my land. You'll have your own rooms. Locked doors if you want them. And if you ever feel unsafe, any of you, I'll drive you back to town myself. Emma held his gaze, searching for the lie. She didn't seem to find one. Fine. She turned to help Grace and Lily into the wagon. But I'm watching you. Good. Mercer's voice held something that might have been approval. You should. He offered Clara his hand to help her up to the bench seat. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was rough, calloused, impersonal, the hand of a man helping livestock into a trailer, nothing more. She settled onto the bench with Tommy in her lap. Mercer climbed up beside her, leaving careful distance between them. Mama! Hannah's small voice came from the wagon bed. Are we going to be okay? Clara looked back at her children huddled together under the blankets Mercer had provided. 4 girls and 1 boy, her entire world. Yes, baby. She hoped it wasn't a lie. We're going to be okay. Mercer clicked to the horses and the wagon lurched forward. Silver Creek fell away behind them. The road climbed steadily into the foothills, leaving behind the scattered buildings of town for endless white expanses of snow-covered prairie. The only sounds were the creak of wagon wheels, the steady clop of hooves, and the whistle of wind across open land. Clara watched the landscape unfold, trying to memorize landmarks. A distinctive rock formation. A frozen creek bed. A stand of pine trees bent sideways by years of prevailing wind. If she needed to escape, she needed to know the way back. It's 10 miles from here to the nearest neighbor. Mercer's voice startled her. He hadn't spoken since leaving town. During winter sometimes we're cut off for weeks. If that worries you, you should know now. Why would it worry me? Isolation does things to people. His eyes stayed on the road, especially people who aren't used to it. I've been isolated before. Not like this. He guided the horses around a drift. During the big storms, the snow piles higher than a man. Can't see 10 feet in front of you. Can't hear anything but wind. Just you and whoever's in the house with you waiting for it to pass. Clara processed this. Is that a warning? It's information. He glanced at her briefly. You should know what you're agreeing to. I didn't agree to anything. You bought us. I bought your debt. His voice tightened. Not you, not your children. Debt can be worked off. People can't be owned. The law would disagree. The law is wrong. The words came hard and flat. I've seen what happens when people treat other people as property. I won't be part of it. Clara studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. You lost someone. The words escaped before she could stop them. Didn't you? Mercer's hands tightened on the reins. For several seconds he didn't answer. My wife, he said finally, and my daughter, 5 years ago, cholera. I'm sorry. Don't be. His voice was carefully neutral. It was a long time ago. It wasn't, Clara thought. Not for him. She recognized the weight of grief still fresh enough to wound she carried the same weight herself. My husband died 6 weeks ago, she heard herself say. Consumption. He was sick for months, but I thought. She stopped, swallowed hard. We always think there's more time. Mercer's voice had lost its edge. Then there isn't. They rode in silence after that, but it was a different silence than before. Not the tense quiet of strangers forced together, but the understanding silence of two people who'd learned the same terrible lessons from life. The ranch emerged from the snow like a mirage. Clara had expected something rough, a frontier cabin perhaps held together with optimism and desperation. What she saw instead made her breath catch. The main house was 2 stories of solid log construction, with a wide porch wrapping the front and stone chimneys rising from both ends. A massive barn sat nearby, along with smaller outbuildings, a smokehouse, a chicken coop, what looked like a workshop. Corral fences made neat geometric patterns against the snow. It was substantial, prosperous, real. This is yours. She couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Been building it for 12 years. Mercer guided the wagon toward the barn. Started as a one-room shack. Added on when I could afford it. It's beautiful. He made a sound that might have been acknowledgement. It's empty. Has been for a while. That's why I need help. The wagon stopped. Before Clara could move, 2 men emerged from the barn, one older, with gray hair and weathered face, one young with red hair and an open smile. Boss? The older man nodded at Mercer, his sharp eyes taking in Clara and the children. You were gone longer than expected. Henry, Will. Mercer jumped down from the wagon. This is Mrs. Thornton and her children. They'll be staying here, working the house. Henry's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. I see. Will's grin widened. Well, that's good news. House could use some looking after. He stepped forward to help Clara down, touching his hat. Ma'am, welcome to Mercer Ranch. Thank you. Clara accepted his hand, then reached back for Tommy. The other children were climbing out their faces, showing varying degrees of exhaustion and uncertainty. Hannah immediately spotted a barn cat and gasped with delight. Grace steadied Lily, who looked ready to collapse. Emma stood apart, arms crossed, scanning the property like she expected threats to emerge from every shadow. Let's get everyone inside. Mercer's voice cut through the moment. Storm's building in the west. We've got maybe 2 hours before it hits. He led them toward the house. Henry fell into step beside Clara. "Ma'am." His voice was low, meant only for her. "The boss is a good man. Strange maybe, keeps to himself, but good." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're scared." Henry's weathered face held no judgment. "You've got 5 young ones, and you just got bought by a stranger and you're wondering what the hell you've gotten yourself into. That's natural. But I've worked for Jacob Mercer for 10 years, and I'm telling you he'll treat you right." Clara didn't know how to respond to that. Before she could try, they reached the house and Mercer pushed open the front door. Clara stepped inside and stopped. The main room was large with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Comfortable furniture worn, but quality clustered around it. A kitchen opened to the left. Stairs led upward to the second floor. Everything was clean enough but neglected. Dust on surfaces that should shine. Disorder in corners that should be organized. The particular staleness of a space occupied by someone merely existing rather than living. "It needs work." Mercer's voice held something like embarrassment. "I know. There's 4 bedrooms upstairs. The children can share 2. You can have the 3rd. Mine's at the end of the hall." "Mr. Mercer." "Jacob." He cut her off. "If we're going to live under the same roof, you might as well use my name." "Jacob." Clara tested it. "Thank you for all of this, but I still don't understand why." He was quiet for a moment, looking around the house he'd built for a wife who was gone for a daughter who would never grow up here. "5 years ago I lost everything that mattered," he said finally. "I kept breathing anyway, kept working, kept going through the motions. But this place, it's been a tomb. I've been living in a tomb of my own making." He turned to face her, and for the first time, Clara saw something real in his eyes. Pain, loneliness, a desperate, suffocated hope. "I saw you on that platform," he continued. "Saw those men bidding on you like you were nothing. Saw your children crying, saw that bastard Murdoch looking at your daughter like she was meat. And something in me just broke. Broke, or maybe woke up." He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know. All I knew was I couldn't let it happen. Couldn't stand there and watch one more family get destroyed when I had the power to stop it." Clara's throat tightened. "So we're your redemption. Your way of making up for not saving your wife and daughter." The words came out harsher than she intended. Mercer flinched like she'd struck him. "Maybe." His voice was raw. "Or maybe I'm just tired of being alone. Maybe I saw 5 children who needed a home and thought I had one to offer. Maybe the reason doesn't matter as much as the fact." They stood there, these 2 broken people surrounded by children who'd gone quiet with the understanding that something important was happening. Finally, Emma spoke. "We're hungry." Her voice was flat, practical, cutting through the emotional weight. "And cold. And tired. Whatever this is between you 2, can it wait until after we've eaten?" Clara almost laughed. Trust Emma to reduce complexity to its essential elements. "She's right." Clara straightened her shoulders. "Show me the kitchen, Jacob. Let me see what I have to work with." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. "This way," he said, and led her deeper into the house that might impossibly become their home. Yet, the kitchen was better stocked than Clara expected. Flour and sugar and salt, cured meat in the cold pantry, canned vegetables lining shelves, coffee in abundance. Someone Henry probably had been keeping the household supplied, even if Mercer himself had stopped caring about meals beyond basic survival. Clara tied on an apron she found hanging by the door and got to work. The children settled into the main room, drawn to the fire Mercer built in the massive hearth. Hannah had somehow acquired the barn cat and was introducing it solemnly to Tommy. Grace found a bookshelf and was examining titles with desperate hunger. Clara hadn't been able to bring any of her books when they lost the house. Lily sat silent and watchful as always. Emma helped Clara in the kitchen, her movements efficient and familiar. "It's not terrible." Emma's voice was quiet, meant only for her mother. "The house, I mean. It's actually nice." "I know. He seems—" Emma struggled for the word. Sad. He's lost people, like us. That doesn't mean we can trust him. No. Clara handed her daughter a pot to fill with water. But it means we might understand each other. They worked in silence for a while, the comfortable rhythm of women preparing food together. Mama, Emma's voice had gone smaller. What Murdoch said. About me. What he wanted to... Clara set down her knife, turned to face her daughter fully. Emma Louise Thornton, look at me. Emma looked up, her eyes bright with tears she was too proud to shed. No one, Clara said fiercely, is ever going to touch you like that. Not Murdoch, not anyone. I will burn this world to the ground before I let someone hurt my children. Do you understand me? A tear escaped down Emma's cheek. But if you couldn't stop it, I would die trying. Clara pulled her daughter into her arms. And I won't have to, because we're safe now. Whatever else happens, we're safe. She hoped it was true. She had to believe it was true, because the alternative was unthinkable. Supper was simple stew from the cured meat biscuits, from scratch coffee for the adults, and warm milk for the children. But it was hot and filling, and Clara watched her children eat with desperate gratitude. They'd been so hungry. For weeks, she'd been stretching every scrap, giving her portions to them, when they weren't looking, lying about having already eaten. Watching them devour real food in adequate quantities made something in her chest finally unclench. Mercer ate at the head of the table, watching everything with that careful, guarded expression. Henry had joined them at Mercer's insistence. Will had eaten earlier and was checking on the animals before the storm hit. This is good. Mercer's voice broke the sound of spoons scraping bowls. Better than anything I've had in years. It's just stew. Just stew cooked by someone who cares about the eating of it. He set down his spoon. Mrs. Thornton. Clara. She surprised herself. If we're using first names. Something flickered across his face. Clara. Tomorrow we should discuss the arrangement. Wages, duties, expectations. Wages? She hadn't expected that. You're working for me. You should be compensated for it. But you paid $200? That cleared your debt. Doesn't mean you work for free. His jaw set in that stubborn line she was beginning to recognize. You'll have wages, room and board included. You and the children will want for nothing within my power to provide. Clara stared at him. In her experience, men didn't operate this way. They took what they could and gave as little as possible. The world ran on exploitation, especially for women without protections. Why? The question escaped for the third time that day. Mercer's eyes moved around the table, touching briefly on each of her children before returning to her. Because I remember what it's like to have a family, he said quietly. And I remember what it's like to lose one. I'm not trying to replace what I had. That's not possible. But maybe there's room for something new. Something that doesn't have to hurt anyone. The wind had picked up outside, rattling the windows. The first snow began to fall visible through the glass in the lamplight. Storm's here, Henry observed. Going to be a bad one. Everyone stay inside tonight. Mercer stood. I'll check the animals one more time, then we'll batten down. Henry, you're welcome to stay in the house if you'd rather not make it back to the bunkhouse. I'll be fine. Done worse. Henry touched his hat to Clara. Ma'am, good meal. Good night. He disappeared into the growing storm. Clara gathered the dishes while Mercer pulled on his coat. Jacob. She stopped him at the door. Thank you. Whatever your reasons? Thank you. He nodded once, then stepped out into the snow. Clara watched him go. This strange man who'd bought her family's freedom and seemed to expect nothing in return. Who'd built a house for ghosts and now filled it with children's voices. Who carried grief like a second skin but still found room for unexpected kindness. Mama, Grace appeared at her elbow. I found a whole shelf of books. Can I really read any of them? You'll have to ask Mr. Mercer. He said I could. Grace's face was bright with joy. He said Rose that was his daughter. He said she loved books too, and she'd want them to be read. Clara's throat tightened. Rose. His daughter who never grew up. Then read as many as you want, sweet girl. Grace hugged her fiercely, then ran back to the bookshelf. Tommy had fallen asleep by the fire, the cat curled against his chest. Hannah was drooping. Lily sat silent as always, but her posture had softened. She was watching the flames with something approaching peace. Emma stood at the window, watching the storm build, her expression unreadable. This impossible day was ending. They'd started it on an auction block facing separation and horrors Clara couldn't let herself imagine. They were ending it in a warm house with full bellies and locked doors, and a man who'd promised safety. She didn't know if she could trust that promise. But tonight, with the storm raging outside and her children safe inside, she was willing to try. Tomorrow would bring questions and challenges and the hard work of building new lives. Tomorrow she would establish boundaries and earn her wages and figure out what kind of man Jacob Mercer really was. But tonight, for the first time in 6 weeks, Clara Thornton allowed herself to feel something she'd thought was gone forever. Hope. The storm lasted 3 days. Clara lost count of the hours somewhere in the middle of the second night when the wind screamed so loud that Tommy woke crying and wouldn't stop until she sang every lullaby she knew twice. The house shook. The windows rattled. Snow piled against the walls until it blocked the lower panes entirely. But the house held. Jacob had built it solid, built it to withstand exactly this kind of assault. Clara found herself grateful for his obsessive craftsmanship as she moved through the days, cooking meals, keeping the children occupied, maintaining order in the chaos of confinement. They fell into patterns without discussing them. Clara rose before dawn to start breakfast. Jacob appeared shortly after, stamping snow from his boots. After checking the animals in the connected barn, a rope strung between house and barn, the only way to navigate the whiteout conditions. They exchanged quiet words about supplies, about the children, about nothing important. Then he retreated to his office or the barn, and she managed the household. The children adapted with the resilience that never stopped amazing her. Grace devoured books like a starving person at a feast, working through Jacob's library with methodical joy. She'd finished 2 novels by the second day of the storm and started a third curled in the corner of the settee, with the cat who'd been named Biscuit by Hannah purring in her lap. Hannah had discovered the chicken coop accessible through the barn and appointed herself egg collector, a job she performed with solemn dedication, despite being barely tall enough to reach the nesting boxes. She reported each morning's findings to Clara with the gravity of a general delivering battlefield intelligence. Lily remained quiet, watchful, but Clara noticed her spending time near Jacob's workshop corner, studying the leather working tools with silent fascination. She didn't touch anything, didn't ask questions, just observed like a small ghost, learning the shape of a new haunting. Tommy attached himself to Jacob with the desperate need of a 3-year-old who'd lost his father and found a replacement before he fully understood the loss. He followed the man everywhere possible, chattering in his half-formed sentences, demanding to be carried, to be shown things, to be included. Jacob handled it with awkward patience that made Clara's chest ache. She watched him crouch to Tommy's level, pointing out how the harness buckles worked, watched him lift her son onto his shoulders so Tommy could see out the high barn windows. Watched his hands, so careful, so gentle, steadying the boy when he wobbled. This was a man who remembered being a father. Emma remained suspicious. She watched Jacob with narrowed eyes, cataloging his movements, noting his interactions with each family member. She positioned herself between him and her younger siblings whenever possible. She asked pointed questions at meals, testing him, probing for weaknesses or lies. Jacob answered every question directly without defensiveness. On the second evening, Emma cornered him in the kitchen while Clara was putting the younger children to bed. "Your wife." Emma's voice carried up the stairs. "How did she really die?" Clara froze on the landing, knowing she should intervene, unable to move. "Cholera." Jacob's response was flat. "Same as my daughter. Same as 30 other people in the valley that summer." "And you didn't get sick." I did. I survived. They didn't. Why? I don't know. Something cracked in his voice. I've asked myself that every day for 5 years. Never found an answer that made sense. Silence stretched. My father coughed blood for 3 months before he died. Emma's voice had changed younger roar. We watched him disappear piece by piece. By the end, he didn't even recognize us. That's a hard thing to carry. Mama tries to protect us from hard things. She thinks we don't notice, but I notice everything. I imagine you do. More silence. Clara held her breath. I don't trust you. Emma's voice firmed again. I want to. This place is nice, and you seem decent, and my brother already loves you. But I've learned that seeming decent doesn't mean anything. You're right. Jacob's agreement was simple. It doesn't. Trust has to be earned through time and consistency. I'm not asking you to trust me today. I'm asking you to watch me and make your own judgment. And if I decide you're dangerous, then I'll help you and your family leave. No questions asked. You just let us go after paying $200? Money doesn't buy people, Emma. I told you that already. Clara heard footsteps. Emma's lighter tread moving past Jacob's heavier one. I'm still watching, Emma said. Good. Keep watching. A door closed, then another. Clara stayed on the landing for a long time processing what she'd heard, her fierce protective daughter trying so hard to be strong. And this broken man letting himself be interrogated by a 14-year-old because he understood that she needed to feel in control of something. She went to bed that night with her thoughts tangled and her heart confused. The storm broke on the third morning. Clara woke to silence, the absence of wind so profound it felt like a physical presence. She slipped from bed, leaving the children sleeping in their shared warmth, and crept downstairs. Jacob stood at the window, coffee cup in hand, watching the dawn paint the snow in shades of pink and gold. It's over, he said without turning. Thank God. She moved to stand beside him. I was starting to forget what the sun looked like. Gets worse than this sometimes. February storms can last a week. Something to look forward to. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. You'll get used to it, or you won't. Hard to tell with newcomers. They stood in companionable silence, watching the world emerge from its white cocoon. Clara. His voice had shifted, grown more serious. We should talk about the arrangement. All right. He turned to face her, and she was struck again by the weariness in his eyes, the loneliness that no amount of practical conversation could quite disguise. I meant what I said about wages. $15 a month plus room and board for you and all the children. You'll manage the household, cooking, cleaning, basic upkeep. I won't ask you to do ranch work unless you want to. That's generous? It's fair. He set down his coffee cup. I also want to be clear about expectations. This is your home now. Not a temporary shelter, not charity that can be revoked. Whatever happens, whatever you decide about staying or going, this is your home for as long as you want it. And if I decide to leave, then I'll give you enough money to start over somewhere else and wish you well. Clara studied him, searching for the catch, the hidden clause, the moment when kindness revealed itself as just another form of control. She couldn't find it. Why do you keep offering us exits? The question burst out. Every conversation you remind us we can leave. Most men would be trying to make us stay. Most men would be trying to own you. His jaw tightened. I watched my wife die in my arms, watched my daughter stop breathing while I begged God to take me instead. And then I spent 5 years alone in this house, surrounded by everything we'd built together, wondering why I kept going. He turned back to the window. The day I saw you on that platform, something changed. I didn't plan to bid. Didn't even know the auction was happening until I saw the crowd. But when I saw those men looking at you, looking at your daughter, I knew exactly what they intended. And I couldn't... His voice broke. I couldn't just stand there. Not again. Not when I could actually do something. So you saved us. I bought time. He faced her again, and the rawness in his expression made her breath catch. That's all. Time for you to recover. Time for your children to feel safe. Time for you to figure out what you actually want. I'm not your savior, Clara. I'm just a man with money and an empty house and too much grief to carry alone. Clara didn't know what to say. She'd expected negotiations, demands, carefully worded contracts that spelled out exactly what she owed and how she'd pay it. She hadn't expected honesty so stark it hurt to hear. Jacob. She waited until he met her eyes. I'm not leaving, not now. Maybe not ever. Something flickered in his face, hope maybe, or fear. You don't have to decide that yet. I know, but I'm telling you anyway. She took a breath. My children are safe here. They're fed and warm and they have room to be children again. Grace has books. Hannah has chickens. Tommy has... She paused. Tommy has you. His throat worked. He calls me Papa sometimes. I should probably correct him. Do you want to correct him? The question hung in the air. No. The word came out rough. God help me, no. I know it's wrong. I know I'm not his father, and I shouldn't let him think his father is dead. Clara's voice was firm. He's 3 years old and he's lost everything, and he needs someone to hold on to. If you're willing to be that person, I'm not going to take it away from him. Jacob stared at her like she'd offered him something precious and dangerous. Clara, he stopped. Started again. I don't know how to do this, any of this. I thought I was just offering employment, but there are children and feelings, and your oldest daughter watches me like I'm a rattlesnake about to strike. Emma will come around. And if she doesn't, then she doesn't. But she won't make me leave just because she's afraid. We don't run anymore. Clara straightened her spine. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have breakfast to make and 5 children to wake. The storm may be over, but the work is just beginning. She walked away before he could respond, feeling his eyes on her back, carrying the weight of a conversation neither of them had been prepared for. In the kitchen, she started coffee and set about making breakfast with hands that trembled slightly. Something had shifted between them. Something she couldn't name and wasn't sure she wanted to examine. But she'd told him the truth. She wasn't leaving. The days after the storm blurred into a rhythm. Clara woke at dawn, made breakfast, sent the older children to their chores while she managed the household with Tommy trailing at her heels. Dinner at midday, supper at dark. Then quiet evenings by the fire, children reading or playing, while the adults sat in silence that grew more comfortable each night. Henry and Will came to the main house for meals now at Clara's insistence. Don't seem right, she'd told Jacob. 2 men eating alone in a cold bunkhouse when there's warm food and company here. He'd agreed without argument. Henry turned out to be a treasure trove of stories about the early days of the ranch, about Jacob and Margaret building their dream together, about little Rose taking her first steps in this very kitchen. Will made Emma laugh. Clara noticed it on the 3rd evening after the storm, the way her daughter's suspicious expression softened when the young ranch hand started telling tales of his misadventures with cattle. The way she forgot to watch Jacob because she was too busy rolling her eyes at Will's obvious exaggerations. It was small, but it was something. He's sweet on her, Clara told Jacob one night when the children were asleep and they'd fallen into the habit of sitting together in the parlor. Will he's sweet on anything female under 50. I mean it. Clara set down her mending. And she's noticing. Jacob's face flickered with something complicated. She's 14. I know. I'm not saying anything will come of it. But it's the first time she's smiled at a man since her father died. They sat with that truth for a moment. I had a talk with Will, Jacob said finally. About appropriate behavior. About remembering she's just a child even if she acts older. Thank you. I didn't do it for you. His voice was gruff. I did it because I remember what it was like to be a young man around a pretty girl, and because Emma deserves better than someone who'd take advantage of her age. Clara studied him. This man who kept surprising her with his quiet decency. You're not what I expected. she admitted. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone harder, more demanding, more... She searched for the word. More like every other man I've known. Those other men didn't know what it was like to lose everything. Jacob's voice had gone quiet. Grief changes you. Sometimes it makes people cruel because the world was cruel to them. But sometimes it makes you kinder. Sometimes it just makes you tired of cruelty, tired of pain, tired of being alone. He met her eyes. Sometimes you just want to build something good, even if you know it might be taken away. Clara felt her heart clench. Before she could respond, a sound came from upstairs, Tommy crying out in the grip of a nightmare. She was on her feet, instantly moving toward the stairs. Clara? Jacob's voice stopped her. Let me. She hesitated. Please. The word was rough. Let me try. She nodded, settling back into her chair with her heart pounding. He disappeared upstairs, his boots heavy on the steps. She heard his voice through the floorboards, low, soothing, too quiet to make out words. Tommy's crying subsided, then stopped, then silence. Several minutes later, Jacob reappeared. He's asleep. His voice was thick. He asked for me to stay until he wasn't scared anymore. And you stayed. I stayed. He sat heavily in his chair. Clara, I don't know what's happening here, between us, with the children. I don't know how to be what they need. You're already being it. She leaned forward. Jacob, my children haven't felt safe in months. Even before Samuel died, they knew something was wrong. They could feel our fear, our desperation. They learned to be afraid of everything, because we taught them that fear. And now Tommy asks for you when he has nightmares. Hannah tells the chicken stories about her new home. Grace has read more books in a week than she has in a year. Even Lily. Clara's voice caught. Lily spoke today, to me while we were doing laundry. She said she liked the smell of the soap. That's good. That's the most she's said at once in 3 months. Clara blinked back tears. You asked what kind of person you should be for them. This kind. Exactly this kind. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. I don't deserve this. His voice was barely audible. Any of it. A second chance, a new family, children who look at me like I might be worth something. I don't deserve it. Neither did I. Clara's response was fierce. I didn't deserve to lose my husband. My children didn't deserve to be sold at auction. We don't get what we deserve, Jacob. We get what we get, and we decide what to do with it. She stood, moving to stand before his chair. I'm deciding to stay. I'm deciding to let my children love you, if that's what they choose. I'm deciding to believe you're exactly who you seem to be, a good man who's been alone too long. She reached down and took his hand. The contact sent shock through both of them. It was the first time they'd touched deliberately, intentionally, not in the practical course of household management, but because one of them wanted to. His fingers closed around hers, rough, calloused, trembling slightly. Clara. Her name was a prayer in his mouth. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. She squeezed his hand. But maybe we can figure it out together. They stood like that for a long moment, connected by clasped hands and shared grief, and the terrifying hope that something new might be possible. Then Clara released him and stepped back. Good night, Jacob. Good night, Clara. She climbed the stairs to her room, to her sleeping children, to the uncertain future that waited for all of them. But for the first time since Samuel died, she didn't feel alone in facing it. The next weeks brought challenges Clara hadn't anticipated. Word spread about the widow Jacob Mercer had bought at auction. Word spread that she was living in his house, sleeping under his roof, raising her 5 children in rooms that should have belonged to his dead wife. Gossip in small towns traveled faster than winter wind. The first sign of trouble came when Clara ventured to town for supplies, her first trip since the auction. Jacob offered to accompany her, but she refused. I won't hide, she told him. They're going to talk regardless. I'd rather face it head on. Will drove her in the wagon, the younger children bundled in the back, Emma sitting rigidly beside her mother on the bench. They arrived at the general store to find a small crowd gathered outside, women in their Sunday best. Despite it being Thursday, their faces arranged in expressions of righteous concern. Mrs. Thornton. The leader stepped forward. Victoria Adams, Clara remembered. Wealthy widow. Town busybody. The kind of woman who wielded propriety like a weapon. How nice to see you out and about. Mrs. Adams. Clara kept her voice neutral. We've been so worried about you, dear. Living out there in the middle of nowhere with a man you barely know, it can't be easy. It's not. Clara climbed down from the wagon. Ranching is hard work, but I'm managing. I'm sure you are. Victoria's smile had edges. Managing quite well from what we hear. Such a cozy arrangement. The insinuation was clear. Clara felt Emma stiffen beside her, felt the attention of the gathered women like heat from flames. If you have something to say, Mrs. Adams, I'd prefer you say it directly. Victoria's smile widened. I'm only concerned for your reputation, dear. A young widow living with a man not her husband, raising children in such an unconventional situation. People will talk. People are already talking. Clara met her gaze without flinching. As you're demonstrating. But here's what I know. My children are fed, clothed, and safe. They have beds to sleep in and a roof over their heads. 3 weeks ago, they were about to be sold separately to strangers. So forgive me if I'm not particularly concerned about what people think of my living arrangements. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Now, if you'll excuse me. Clara moved toward the store entrance. I have supplies to purchase. Victoria stepped into her path. Mrs. Thornton, you may not care about your own reputation, but surely you care about your daughters. Growing up in that kind of household. Growing up safe and loved. Clara's voice had gone dangerous. Growing up with food in their bellies and adults who protect them. Yes, I care deeply about that. And I'll thank you to keep your opinions about my daughters to yourself. Mama. Emma's hand found her arm, a warning, not a restraint. Clara took a breath, forced her voice back to level. Mrs. Adams, I have no quarrel with you. I have no interest in your approval or your condemnation. I'm trying to survive and raise my children, and that's going to require all the energy I have, if you'll excuse me. She pushed past Victoria and into the store, Emma and the younger children following. Inside, she leaned against a shelf and let out a shaking breath. Mama. Hannah's small voice was worried. Why was that lady being mean? Some people don't understand our situation, baby. They think they know better than we do about how we should live. But Mr. Jacob is nice. He lets me collect eggs. I know, sweetheart, but not everyone sees what we see. Emma had been silent through the exchange. Now she spoke. She's going to cause trouble. Her voice was flat. Women like that always do. Probably. Clara straightened. But we can't stop living our lives because of what Victoria Adams might say. Come on, let's get what we need and go home. Home. The word had slipped out naturally without thought. Emma noticed. Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she said nothing. They completed their shopping under the hostile gazes of the shopkeeper and the whispers of other customers. Will loaded the supplies with determined cheerfulness, ignoring the pointed comments from bystanders. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. That evening, Clara told Jacob about the confrontation. Victoria Adams. His jaw tightened. She's been after this ranch for years. Wanted Margaret out so she could move in. When Margaret died, she started circling like a vulture. You mean she wants to be the next Mrs. Mercer. Wants the land, the house, the respectability of marrying into one of the oldest ranches in the territory. He grimaced. I've turned her down 3 times. She's not pleased. Clara processed this information. So her concern for my reputation is concern that I've brought in competition. Jacob's voice was bitter. She doesn't care about you or your children. She cares about being displaced. Then we haven't just made an enemy. We've made a determined one. Clara. Jacob's hand found hers, that gesture of connection they'd begun to develop. I won't let her hurt you. Or the children. Whatever she tries, we'll face it together. Together. The word wrapped around Clara's heart. We should be careful. She didn't withdraw her hand. About how things look. Not because I care what Victoria thinks, but because she could make real trouble if she decides to involve the marshal or the territorial authorities. What kind of trouble? The kind that questions whether it's appropriate for a widow to be living with a bachelor. The kind that wonders if my children are being properly cared for. The kind that could take them from me. The words hung heavy in the air. Jacob's grip on her hand tightened. That won't happen. You can't promise that. No. His voice was fierce. But I can promise I'll fight for it. For you. For them. Whatever it takes. Clara looked at him, this man she'd known for barely 2 weeks, who'd already become central to her world in ways she couldn't have imagined. Why? The question emerged before she could stop it. Why do we matter so much to you? He was quiet for a long moment. Because you gave me a reason to care again. His voice was rough. Because when Tommy calls me Papa, I remember what it felt like to matter to someone. Because watching you fight for your children reminds me why I built this place in the first place. Jacob, you asked once if you were my redemption, my second chance. He met her eyes. Maybe you are. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe I was just dying by inches, and you're teaching me how to live again. The raw honesty of it undid her. Before she could think, before she could weigh consequences, Clara leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, barely more than a brush of contact. But it changed everything. She pulled back, heart hammering. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. His voice was hoarse. Don't ever apologize for that. They stared at each other, something new and fragile trembling between them. This is complicated, Clara whispered. Yes. The children, Victoria, the whole situation. Yes. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I. He reached up, touched her face with infinite gentleness. But I know I don't want to stop. Whatever this is, wherever it's going, I don't want to stop. Clara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. One day at a time, she said. We'll figure it out one day at a time. One day at a time, he agreed. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet, blanketing the world in white. Inside, 2 broken people sat together in the firelight, their hands clasped, their futures uncertain, but no longer quite so alone. The kiss haunted Clara for days. She moved through her routines, cooking, cleaning, managing children, but her mind kept circling back to that moment. The warmth of Jacob's lips, the tenderness in his touch, the way he'd looked at her afterward like she'd given him something precious and terrifying. They didn't speak of it. By unspoken agreement, they maintained careful distance during the day, never alone together longer than necessary. But the evenings were different. After the children slept, they found each other in the parlor, hands, eventually seeking hands' silence, speaking what words couldn't. Emma noticed. Of course she noticed. Emma noticed everything. You look at him different now. Her voice was flat as she helped Clara with the breakfast dishes. He looks at you different too. Clara's hands stilled in the soapy water. Emma. I'm not stupid, Mama. Something changed. We're still figuring out what we are to each other. That's all. Are you going to marry him? The question hit Clara like cold water. I don't know. It's too soon to. Papa's only been dead 2 months. The words hung between them, sharp and accusing. Clara dried her hands, slowly turning to face her daughter. I know. Do you? Emma's eyes blazed. Because it seems like you've forgotten. Like you've already moved on to your new life with your new family and your new... Emma Louise Thornton. Clara's voice cut through. That's enough. It's not enough. Papa loved us. He worked himself to death trying to provide for us. And now you're kissing another man like— Like what? Clara stepped closer. Like I'm still alive, like I'm trying to survive, like I'm doing everything I can to keep this family together. Like Papa didn't matter. The accusation broke something in Clara's chest. She sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted. Your father mattered. He mattered more than anything, and losing him nearly destroyed me. Then why? Because I can't afford to be destroyed. Clara looked up at her daughter, letting Emma see the tears she'd been hiding. I have 5 children who need me. 5 children who were almost sold to strangers. I don't have the luxury of mourning properly, Emma. I have to keep going. Emma's rigid posture softened slightly. That doesn't mean you have to— with him. Jacob gave us a home when we had nothing. He's been kind and patient and decent in every way. And yes, I have feelings for him. I didn't plan to. I certainly didn't expect to. But I won't apologize for finding someone who makes me feel like maybe everything won't always hurt. What about what Papa would think? Clara took a shaking breath. Your father would think I should do whatever it takes to keep his children safe and happy. He would want me to find joy again, not spend the rest of my life as a ghost. Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I miss him, Mama. Every day. I know, baby. Clara opened her arms, and Emma, fierce, suspicious, protective Emma, fell into them like a child half her age. I miss him too. That never stops. But missing him doesn't mean we stop living. They held each other in the kitchen, mother and daughter, grief and hope tangled together. I don't hate Mr. Jacob. Emma's voice was muffled against Clara's shoulder. I wanted to. It would be easier. But he's not horrible. No, he's not. He makes Tommy happy, and Grace. Even Lily seems less scared around him. And you? Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes with characteristic impatience. I'm still watching him. I know you are. But maybe— Emma hesitated. Maybe I don't hate the idea of him quite as much anymore. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. That's enough for now. The fragile peace lasted exactly 4 days. On the 5th day, Victoria Adams arrived at the ranch with the territorial marshal in tow. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard the horses. She moved to the window, saw the wagon approaching, and felt her stomach drop. Jacob! She called out before she could think. He emerged from the barn, Henry beside him. Will stopped chopping wood, axe still raised. The children playing in the yard went still. The wagon stopped. Victoria descended with practiced grace, her expression one of studied concern. The marshal, a heavy-set man with a gray mustache and tired eyes, followed more slowly. Mr. Mercer. Victoria's voice carried sweetly. I hope we're not intruding. Mrs. Adams. Jacob's tone was flat. Marshal Briggs. What brings you out here? Concern. Victoria pressed a hand to her chest. Deep concern for the welfare of the children living in this household. Several upstanding citizens have raised questions about the propriety of the current arrangement. Clara stepped onto the porch, drawing their attention. What kind of questions? Victoria's smile sharpened. Questions about whether it's appropriate for 5 minor children to be living with an unmarried man and an unmarried woman under the same roof. Questions about what kind of moral example is being set. Questions about whether these children might be better served in a more traditional environment. The threat was clear. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. My children are well cared for. I'm sure you believe that, dear. But appearances matter. And from the outside, this looks very much like a situation that could be damaging to young minds. Marshal Briggs shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Adams requested I investigate the welfare of the minors. I'm required to follow up on formal complaints. There's nothing to investigate. Jacob stepped forward. Mrs. Thornton is my employee. She manages the household. The children live here as part of her employment arrangement. And do you and Mrs. Thornton share living quarters? Victoria's voice dripped false innocence. We live in the same house. We sleep in separate rooms. There's nothing improper happening. Your word, of course. Victoria turned to the marshal. I believe the children should be interviewed separately, to ensure they're not being coached in what to say. Clara's blood went cold. Emma had moved to stand beside her mother, her face pale but determined. The younger children clustered behind them, Hannah holding Tommy's hand, Grace shielding Lily. You want to interrogate my children? Clara's voice shook with controlled fury. Take them aside and question them about whether their mother is behaving properly. It's standard procedure in welfare investigations. Victoria's tone remained pleasant. Unless you have something to hide. I have nothing to hide. But I won't have my children frightened and confused by strangers asking them inappropriate questions. Clara. Jacob's hand found her arm a brief touch of support. Let me handle this. He stepped toward the marshal, his voice low and controlled. Tom, I've known you for 15 years. You knew Margaret. You held Rose when she was christened. You really going to stand there and let this woman use you to terrorize children? Marshal Briggs's jaw tightened. I don't have a choice, Jacob. Formal complaint's been filed. I have to investigate. Then investigate. Look at the house. Check the children's health. Ask me anything you want. But those children aren't going to be interviewed by Victoria Adams while she fishes for ammunition. I'm not fishing for anything. Victoria's voice had hardened. I'm protecting innocent children from a potentially harmful situation. You're trying to destroy a family because I won't marry you. Jacob's words landed like stones. That's what this is really about. It's always been about that. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. How dare you? How dare I speak the truth? You've been circling this ranch since Margaret died. 3 proposals turned down. 3 times I told you I wasn't interested. And now that there's someone else living here suddenly, you're concerned about the children's welfare. The marshal looked between them, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Victoria. His voice was tired. Is there any truth to what Jacob's saying? Absolutely not. My concern is purely for the children. Then explain why you never expressed concern about the children's welfare until after Mrs. Thornton arrived. Jacob crossed his arms. Explain why, if this is about propriety, you never raised objections to me living alone with male ranch hands. Explain why your sudden interest in children's well-being coincides exactly with your last rejected proposal. Victoria's face flushed red. This is outrageous. Marshal, I insist you proceed with the investigation. But Briggs was studying her with new eyes. Mrs. Adams, did you or did you not propose marriage to Mr. Mercer recently? That's irrelevant. Did you? Victoria's jaw worked. I may have expressed interest in formalizing our neighborly relationship. For practical purposes. Our properties adjoin. And when Mr. Mercer declined, he was rude and ungentlemanly about the whole thing. So, you filed a welfare complaint. The marshal's voice had gone flat. Against the household of the man who rejected you. That's not why, Mrs. Adams. Briggs held up a hand. I'm going to conduct a cursory inspection of this property. I'm going to verify that the children appear healthy and well cared for. And then I'm going to close this investigation and note in my report that the complaint appears to have been filed in bad faith. Victoria sputtered. You can't. I can, and I will. He turned to Jacob. I apologize for the intrusion. I'll be brief. The inspection took 20 minutes. Briggs walked through the house, nodding at the clean rooms and full pantry. He looked at the children, asked a few gentle questions about whether they had enough to eat and whether anyone had hurt them. He examined the sleeping arrangements. Clara's room, the children's shared room, Jacob's room at the opposite end of the hall. Everything appears in order. He made notes in a small book. Children seem healthy. Living conditions are adequate. I see no evidence of impropriety or neglect. Victoria, who had been forced to wait outside, pushed forward when he emerged. You barely looked. Those children could be trained to lie. Mrs. Adams. Briggs's voice cut her off. I've seen enough. This investigation is closed. If you file another frivolous complaint, I'll have words with the territorial judge about misuse of official resources. Victoria's face contorted with fury. You'll regret this. She pointed at Clara. All of you will. This isn't over. She swept toward her wagon, with what dignity she could muster. The marshal watched her go, then turned back to Jacob. I'm sorry, Jacob. Truly. She caught me at a bad time, and I didn't think through the implications. He glanced at Clara. Ma'am, for what it's worth, I don't see anything wrong with your situation. People talk, but talk isn't law. Thank you, Marshal. Clara's voice was steadier than she felt. He touched his hat and mounted his horse, following Victoria's wagon back toward town. Silence settled over the ranch yard. Then Hannah's small voice broke it. Mama, why was that lady so mean? Clara knelt and gathered her youngest daughter close. Some people are unhappy, and they want everyone else to be unhappy too. But we're not unhappy. We like it here. I know, baby, I know. Jacob stood apart, his expression unreadable. When Clara met his eyes, she saw the tension coiled in every line of his body. We should talk. His voice was rough. Tonight, after the children are asleep. Clara nodded, knowing what was coming. The reckoning couldn't be avoided any longer. That evening, after the house had gone quiet and the children slept, Clara found Jacob in the parlor. He stood at the window looking out at the darkness, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. She won't stop. His voice was flat. Victoria. This was a setback, but she won't stop. I know. She has money, influence, friends in places that matter. He turned to face her. She'll find another angle, another way to make trouble. What do you suggest? He was quiet for a long moment. There's one solution that would end this permanently. His voice was careful. One thing that would make the gossip stop and give Victoria no legal ground to stand on. Clara's heart began to pound. Marriage. The word fell between them like a dropped stone. I'm not asking because of Victoria. Jacob set down his glass and moved toward her. I need you to understand that. I'm asking because these past weeks have shown me something I didn't think was possible. Jacob, let me finish. He stopped an arm's length away. I was dead inside. For 5 years I went through the motions of living, while everything that mattered had turned to ash. Then you came, and your children, and suddenly this house had life in it again. His hands found hers rough and trembling. I watched Tommy follow me around like I hung the moon. I watched Grace devouring books, and Hannah counting eggs, and Lily finally starting to speak again. I watch Emma glaring at me like I might hurt you, and I'm grateful because it means someone's protecting you the way you deserve. Clara's eyes were burning. And I watch you. His voice dropped. I watch you every day, working so hard, loving so fiercely, surviving when survival shouldn't be possible. And I think about that kiss, and I think about what it might be like to have that. Really have it. Not stolen moments, but a real life together. It's only been a few weeks. I know. My husband has been dead less than 3 months. I know that too. People will say I'm mercenary, that I married you for your ranch, your money. Let them say it. His grip tightened. Let them say whatever they want. The only opinions that matter are inside this house. Clara looked at this man, this broken, gentle, stubborn man, who'd paid a fortune to save her family and asked for nothing in return, who held her children with care and looked at her with something that might be love. I can't promise I'll be a good wife. Her voice wavered. I don't know if I can love you the way you deserve. You don't have to promise anything. Just consider it. Consider what it could mean for all of us. The children would have a father, a stable home, legal protection no one could challenge. He paused. And Emma could stop worrying that you'll be taken away. The practicality of it shouldn't have been romantic, but somehow it was. I need time. Clara's voice was barely audible. To think. To talk to the children. Take all the time you need. Jacob released her hand, stepping back. I won't pressure you. Whatever you decide, nothing changes about your place here. She should go to bed, should retreat to her room and process everything that had just happened. Instead, she stepped forward and kissed him. This time it wasn't brief. This time, she let herself sink into it. Let his arms wrap around her. Let herself feel what she'd been fighting for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. Is that a yes? His voice was rough. That's an I'm considering it very seriously. He laughed, an actual laugh, rusty from disuse but real. I'll take it. They stood together in the firelight, not speaking, just breathing. Two people on the edge of something that might be wonderful or might be disaster. Clara chose to believe it would be wonderful. The next morning she gathered her children in the parlor. Emma sat rigid in her chair. Grace looked up from her book with curious eyes. Lily pressed close to Clara's side, sensing something important. Hannah bounced with barely contained energy. And Tommy played on the floor, oblivious to the gravity of the moment. I need to talk to you about something. Clara's voice was steady, despite her hammering heart. About Mr. Jacob. About our future. He asked you to marry him. Emma's voice was flat. Didn't he? He did. And I want to know what all of you think about it. Grace's eyes went wide. Really, you want our opinion? You're part of this family. Any decision I make affects all of you. So yes, I want your opinion. I think it's romantic. Grace clutched her book to her chest. Like in the stories. The mysterious rancher who saves the widow and her children. This isn't a story, Grace. Emma's voice was sharp. I know, but that doesn't mean it can't be good. What do you think, Emma? Clara asked quietly. Her oldest daughter was silent for a long moment. I think... Emma stopped, started again. I think he's not what I expected. I thought he'd be like the other men, cruel or greedy or fake. But he's not. He's actually... What? Kind. The word seemed to cost Emma something. He's kind in ways that don't make sense. He doesn't have to be, but he is. Does that mean you approve? I don't disapprove. Emma met her mother's eyes. And for me, that's practically a blessing. Clara turned to Lily, quiet, watchful Lily, who spoke so rarely. What about you, sweetheart? What do you think? Lily was silent so long, Clara thought she wouldn't answer. Then in her soft voice, he has gentle hands. When he showed me how to oil the leather, he was careful, patient. It was more words than Lily had strung together in months. Clara blinked back tears. Hannah, Tommy. I want Mr. Jacob to be my papa. Hannah's enthusiasm burst out. He knows all about chickens, and he said he'd teach me to ride a horse when I'm bigger, and he always saves me the biggest biscuit. Tommy looked up from his toys, sensing his name. Papa. He pointed at the door toward where Jacob was working in the barn. Clara's heart cracked open. Yes, baby. Her voice was thick. Papa. She looked at her children, 5 faces, 5 sets of eyes watching her, waiting. So if I said yes, she said carefully, if I married Mr. Jacob and we all became a real family, you would be all right with that? We'd be happy with that. Grace's voice was firm. All of us, even Emma. Emma rolled her eyes but didn't disagree. Clara took a breath. Then I think, she said slowly, we should go tell him the good news. They found Jacob in the barn mending a harness with Henry. He looked up at the sound of approaching footsteps, saw Clara leading her 5 children toward him, and went very still. Clara stopped a few feet away. The children and I have discussed your proposal. Her voice was formal, but her eyes were warm. We've taken a vote. Jacob set down the harness. And it was unanimous. Clara's smile broke through. We accept. For a moment Jacob didn't move. Then Tommy broke free of his sisters and ran toward him, arms raised. Papa Mama said yes. You're gonna be our papa. Mom. Jacob caught him, lifted him high, and Clara saw tears streaming down the rancher's weathered face. Yeah, little man. His voice cracked. I'm gonna be your papa. Hannah was next, throwing herself at his legs. Then Grace, more reserved, but no less joyful. Even Lily crept forward to touch his arm, her silent presence a gift. Emma hung back. Jacob met her eyes over the heads of her siblings. Emma. His voice was rough. I know this is hard. I know I'm not your father and I never will be, but I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of this family. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and offered her hand. Don't make me regret this. Jacob shook it solemnly. I won't. Clara watched her strange, broken, beautiful new family and felt something she'd thought she'd never feel again. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. They would face challenges. Victoria wouldn't give up easily. The town would gossip. There would be hard days and harder winters, but they would face it together. And somehow, that made everything possible. The wedding was set for 2 weeks before Christmas. Clara wanted something simple, a quiet ceremony at the ranch with just the family and ranch hands present. Jacob agreed without argument, understanding that neither of them needed spectacle. They'd both done the grand wedding once before. This time, practicality and sincerity would suffice. But word traveled fast in small communities. Reverend Thomas Shaw arrived at the ranch 3 days after the engagement became known, his weathered face creased with concern. Jacob, Mrs. Thornton. He dismounted slowly, his joints protesting the cold. I've come to discuss the upcoming nuptials. Clara felt her shoulders tense. Is there a problem, Reverend? That depends on your perspective. He removed his hat, revealing thinning gray hair. I've received considerable pressure from certain members of my congregation regarding this union. Victoria Adams. Jacob's voice was flat. Among others. The Reverend shifted uncomfortably. They've requested I refuse to perform the ceremony. They claim it would be endorsing an improper relationship. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. There's nothing improper about 2 adults choosing to marry. I agree. Shaw's response surprised her, which is why I'm here to tell you I'll be honored to officiate and to warn you that there may be complications. What kind of complications? Mrs. Adams has been speaking to the territorial judge. She's attempting to establish grounds for questioning the validity of the marriage itself. Jacob stepped forward, his body rigid with barely controlled anger. On what basis? She claims Mrs. Thornton is being coerced, that the power imbalance between you employer and employee, buyer and bought, makes true consent impossible. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. That's ridiculous. Her voice shook. I'm choosing this. My children are choosing this. No one is forcing anyone. I believe you. Shaw's eyes were kind. But the law doesn't always account for nuance. If Victoria can convince the judge that your circumstances prevent genuine consent, she could potentially have the marriage annulled. And then what? Jacob's voice was dangerous. She sweeps in to claim the ranch, the children. I don't know her endgame. I only know she's determined. The Reverend looked between them. I wanted you to understand what you're facing. This won't be a simple exchange of vows. Clara turned to Jacob, searching his face for doubt or hesitation. She found only steel. Thank you for the warning, Reverend. Jacob's voice was calm. We'll proceed as planned. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He looked at Clara, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Whatever Victoria throws at us, we'll handle together. Shaw nodded slowly. Then I'll see you in 2 weeks. And may God grant you strength for what's coming. He rode away, leaving them standing in the cold yard. Jacob. Clara's voice was tight. If this puts the children at risk, it won't. He turned to face her fully. Listen to me. I have documentation of your employment. Witnesses to your freedom of movement. Letters you've written to your sister in Virginia that prove you're not isolated or controlled. I wrote those letters weeks ago. And they establish a pattern of independence, of choice. He took her hands. Victoria is grasping at straws. She has no real case, only influence and determination. We have truth. Truth doesn't always win. It will this time. His grip tightened. I won't let her take this from us, from the children. I won't. Clara wanted to believe him. She had to believe him. The alternative was unthinkable. The days leading to the wedding were tense, but purposeful. Clara threw herself into preparations, not elaborate decorations or fancy food, but the practical work of merging two lives. She reorganized closets to make room for Jacob's things in what would become their shared bedroom. She adjusted meal routines to accommodate what she was learning about his preferences. She began teaching the children to call him Papa, naturally, rather than as a correction. Emma remained the holdout. I'll call him Jacob. Her voice was firm when Clara broached the subject. Or Mr. Mercer, but not Papa. Papa was Papa. Clara didn't push. Some things couldn't be forced. 3 days before the wedding, another visitor arrived. Clara was kneading bread when she heard the wagon. She wiped her hands and moved to the window, expecting more trouble. What she saw made her heart stop. A woman descended from the wagon, tall, thin, with graying hair pulled back severely. A face Clara would have recognized anywhere. Aunt Margaret? She was out the door before she finished speaking. Aunt Margaret. Her father's sister looked up, her stern face softening. Clara Jane, my God, look at you. They embraced in the frozen yard, Clara's flower-covered hands leaving white prints on her aunt's dark traveling coat. How are you here? How did you know? Your letters to your sister. She forwarded them to me. Margaret pulled back to study Clara's face. She was worried, and frankly so was I. Worried? A widow with 5 children bought at auction by a stranger and now marrying him, you can understand our concern. Clara's joy dimmed slightly. You came to stop the wedding. I came to see for myself. Margaret's voice held the same directness Clara remembered from childhood. To make sure my niece hasn't lost her mind or her freedom. I haven't lost either. Then prove it. Show me this man. Show me this life you've chosen. Clara took a breath. Come inside. Meet the children first. The introduction was chaos. 5 children of varying ages, all curious about this unexpected relative. Hannah immediately demanded to show Aunt Margaret the chickens. Tommy wanted to be held. Grace peppered her with questions about the journey from Virginia. Even Lily crept close, studying the newcomer with those watchful eyes. Emma stood apart, assessing. Your oldest. Margaret's observation was quiet. She's protective. She has reason to be. Good. A family needs someone watching for danger. Margaret's approval seemed to shift something in Emma's posture. When Jacob returned from the range at midday, he found a stranger sitting at his kitchen table drinking coffee like she owned the place. You must be Jacob Mercer. Margaret didn't rise. I'm Margaret Thornton, Clara's aunt. Mrs. Thornton. Jacob removed his hat. Clara mentioned you. Did she mention I've come to determine whether you're worthy of her? Clara winced. Aunt Margaret? Hush, child. I've traveled 1,000 miles to ask hard questions. I intend to ask them. Jacob pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Ask whatever you want. For the next hour, Margaret interrogated him. She asked about his income, his property, his debts. She asked about his first wife and daughter, and Clara watched him answer with painful honesty. She asked about the auction, about his reasons for bidding about what he expected from Clara in return. Through it all, Jacob remained calm and direct. You paid $200 for my niece and her children. Margaret's voice was flat. You expect me to believe that was pure altruism? No. I expect you to believe it was desperation. Desperation. I was dying inside Mrs. Thornton. Slowly, surely, day by day, the ranch was prospering, but I was withering. Then I saw Clara on that platform, saw what was about to happen to her family, and something in me snapped. So she saved you. We're saving each other. Jacob's eyes found Clara's. That's what marriage should be, isn't it? Two people helping each other survive what neither could face alone. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. You love her. It wasn't a question. More than I thought I could love again. Yes. And if she decided tomorrow that she wanted to leave, take the children, and go somewhere else, I would help her pack and give her money for the journey. Jacob's voice didn't waver. Her freedom matters more to me than my happiness. Something shifted in Margaret's expression. Clara. She turned to her niece. Leave us alone for a moment. Clara hesitated, but Margaret's look brooked no argument. She retreated to the parlor, heart-pounding, straining to hear the muffled conversation from the kitchen. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Finally, Margaret emerged. Well? Clara couldn't keep the anxiety from her voice. He'll do. Margaret's tone was grudging, but genuine. He's rough around the edges, and clearly haunted by things he won't discuss. But he looks at you like you're the answer to prayers he forgot how to speak. So you approve. I approve of you marrying a man who respects you. Whether that's this particular man. Margaret sighed. You're a grown woman, Clara. You've survived things that would break most people. I trust your judgment. Clara's eyes burned. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm staying for the wedding, and I'm watching him like a hawk watches a field mouse. Despite everything, Clara laughed. Fair enough. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold. Clara woke early, unable to sleep, and found herself standing at the window watching the sun paint the snow in shades of rose and gold. In a few hours, she would become Clara Mercer. Her children would have a legal father. Their family would be recognized by law and community. It should have felt like an ending the final chapter of her life as Samuel's widow. Instead, it felt like a beginning. Mama! Grace appeared in the doorway, still in her nightgown. Are you scared? A little. Clara opened her arms, and Grace crossed to lean against her. It's a big change. Do you love him? The question Clara had been asking herself for weeks. I think I'm learning to. She stroked Grace's hair. Love isn't always a lightning bolt, sweetheart. Sometimes it's a slow sunrise. You don't notice it happening until suddenly the whole world is bright. That's pretty. Grace looked up at her. I think he loves you. The way he looks at you when you're not watching, it's like how Papa used to look at you. Clara's throat tightened. You noticed that. I notice everything. Just like Emma, but quieter about it. They stood together, mother and daughter, watching the sunrise. I'm glad we're staying, Grace said softly. I was so scared when we were on that platform. I thought we were going to lose each other forever. But instead, we found this. Found what? A home. A real one. With books and chickens, and a papa who knows how to make Tommy laugh. Clara hugged her daughter close. We did find that, didn't we? We found a family. Grace's voice was certain. And families stick together, no matter what. The ceremony was simple. Reverend Shaw stood before the fireplace, Bible in hand. Clara wore her mother's dress, the same one she'd married Samuel in, carefully preserved through all their travels. Jacob wore his best suit, clearly uncomfortable in formal clothes, but determined to honor the occasion. The children formed a semicircle around them. Margaret stood to the side, her expression still watchful, but no longer hostile. Henry and Will flanked the room like sentries. Dearly beloved, Shaw's voice was warm. We gather here to witness the union of two souls who have found each other in the midst of tragedy and chosen hope over despair. Clara's hands trembled in Jacob's grip. Marriage is not a contract but a covenant, not a transaction but a transformation. These two have already begun the work of building a life together. Now they formalize that commitment before God and community. He turned to Jacob. Do you, Jacob William Mercer, take Clara Jane Thornton to be your wife? To love and cherish in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do. Jacob's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. And do you, Clara Jane Thornton, take Jacob William Mercer to be your husband? To love and cherish in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live. Clara looked at this man who had saved her family, who had earned her children's trust, who had somehow slipped past every defense she'd built. I do. Then by the power vested in me, by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. Shaw smiled. You may kiss your bride. Jacob's kiss was gentle, reverent, a promise more than a passion. When they broke apart, Hannah couldn't contain herself any longer. Does this mean you're really our papa now? Jacob knelt to her level. It means I'm really your papa now, legal and everything. Forever. Forever. Hannah threw her arms around his neck. Tommy joined her, then Grace, then Lily. Even Emma moved closer, though she didn't join the embrace. Clara watched her new husband buried in children and felt her heart expand until it ached. This was her family now. This was her life. The celebration was small but genuine. Margaret had somehow produced a cake from ingredients Clara hadn't known they possessed. Henry produced a fiddle he hadn't played in years. Will kept the children entertained with stories and games. For a few hours, the weight of Victoria's threats and the town's gossip faded into background noise. As evening fell, Margaret drew Clara aside. I'm leaving tomorrow. Her voice was quiet. Heading back east before the weather closes the passes. So soon. I've seen what I needed to see. Margaret's hand found Clara's. You're in good hands, child. Better hands than I expected. Thank you for coming, for giving him a chance. Thank you for surviving. Margaret's voice cracked slightly. When I got your sister's letter, heard what happened with the auction, I thought we'd lost you. You almost did. Clara squeezed her aunt's hand. But I'm still here. We're all still here. Promise me something. Anything. When the next storm comes, and it will, there's always a next storm. Promise me you'll remember today. Remember this feeling. It will help you weather what's ahead. Clara didn't ask what her aunt meant. She had a feeling she'd find out soon enough. That night, after the children were asleep and the guests had gone, Clara and Jacob stood alone in their bedroom, their shared bedroom now for the first time. Mrs. Mercer. Jacob's voice was rough. How does it feel? Strange. Clara turned to face him. Good strange. But strange. He moved closer, his hands finding her waist. We don't have to. I mean, if you're not ready. Jacob. She silenced him with a finger on his lips. I'm ready. Are you sure? I'm sure I want to try. I'm sure I want this life with you. She stepped into his arms. The rest we'll figure out together. He kissed her then deeply, without the restraint of their previous encounters. Clara let herself respond, let herself feel, let herself want. They had time. They had each other. They had a future neither had thought possible. It was enough. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th day of their marriage, a man arrived at the ranch with papers from the territorial court. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer. He was young, nervous, clearly uncomfortable with his errand. I'm required to serve you with notice of a hearing scheduled for January 15th. Clara's blood went cold. What kind of hearing? A competency hearing. He thrust the papers toward Jacob. Regarding the welfare of the minor children currently residing in your household. Mrs. Victoria Adams has petitioned the court to assess whether the children would be better served in alternative placement. She wants to take my children. Clara's voice rose. She can't do that. We're married now. There's nothing improper. The petition was filed before your marriage, ma'am. The judge agreed to proceed with the hearing despite the changed circumstances. The young man backed toward his horse. I'm sorry. I'm just the messenger. He fled before either of them could respond. Clara's hands shook as Jacob read the legal documents. She's claiming we're unfit. His voice was tight. Both of us. Says my grief has left me unstable. Says you're suffering from hysteria brought on by trauma. Says the children are in danger of moral corruption. That's insane. It's a legal strategy. Jacob looked up, his eyes hard. If she can convince a judge we're unfit, she can have the children placed elsewhere, probably with a family of her choosing. A family that would raise them according to her values. Clara felt sick. A family that would owe her favors. Or worse. Jacob's jaw clenched. Victoria doesn't want your children, Clara. She wants leverage. If she controls them, she controls us. Then what do? We fight. He crumpled the papers in his fist. We get a lawyer. We gather witnesses. We prove we're exactly what those children need. Clara's mind raced. Emma. She's 14, old enough that her testimony might matter. And Dr. Brennan examined all the children when they first arrived. He can speak to their health. Henry and Will can testify about how the children are treated. Your aunt is already on her way east. Then we'll get a letter from her, a sworn statement. Jacob gripped her shoulders. Clara, listen to me. We're not going to lose them. I don't care what Victoria does or who she pays off. Those children are ours now, and I will burn this territory to the ground before I let anyone take them. The ferocity in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in months. Together, she said. Together. They stood in their bedroom, newly married, facing a threat that could destroy everything they'd built. The fire crackled, the wind howled outside, and somewhere in town, Victoria Adams was planning her next move. But Clara had stopped running. She had a husband who would fight for her, children who needed her, a home worth defending. Whatever came next, she would face it standing up. The weeks before the hearing were the longest of Clara's life. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. Every time she looked at her children, she saw them being torn from her arms, scattered to the wind, like they'd nearly been at that auction. The nightmare that had started on that platform in Silver Creek wasn't over. It had simply changed shape. Jacob threw himself into building their defense. He rode to town 3 times in the first week, meeting with the only lawyer in the territory willing to take their case, a young man named Thomas Harding, who'd recently arrived from Boston and hadn't yet learned to fear Victoria Adams. She's powerful, Harding admitted during his first visit to the ranch. But she's also overreached. The law doesn't look kindly on people who use the courts to pursue personal vendettas. Can you prove that's what this is? Clara asked. I can try. I'll need statements from everyone who witnessed her behavior. The marshal, the reverend, anyone who's heard her express interest in Mr. Mercer's property or person. Half the town has heard her. Jacob's voice was bitter. The other half is too scared to admit it. Then we find the brave half. They weren't entirely alone. Dr. Brennan provided a detailed medical report on all 5 children, noting their improved health since arriving at the ranch. Reverend Shaw wrote a letter attesting to the moral character of both Clara and Jacob. Even Marshal Briggs, despite his initial reluctance, agreed to testify about Victoria's apparent motivations. But it was Emma who surprised them all. I want to speak at the hearing. She announced it over dinner, her voice firm. I'm 14. I'm old enough to have my testimony considered. Emma, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Emma met Clara's eyes. Mama, I've watched you fight for us since Papa died. I've watched Jacob fight for us since the day he bought our debt. Now it's my turn. They'll ask you difficult questions. Jacob's voice was gentle. They'll try to trip you up, make you say things you don't mean. I know what I mean. Emma's jaw set in that stubborn line. I mean that this is my family. I mean that we're safe here. I mean that anyone who tries to take us away will have to go through me first. Clara's throat closed with emotion. When did you grow up so much? Somewhere between the auction block and now. Emma's voice softened. I'm not a little girl anymore, Mama. Let me help protect us. The night before the hearing, Clara couldn't sleep. She slipped from bed, careful not to wake Jacob, and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The fire had burned low, but she didn't bother stoking it. She just sat in the darkness, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at nothing. Clara. Jacob's voice came from the doorway. What's wrong? Everything. Nothing. She didn't turn around. I keep thinking about what happens if we lose. He crossed the room and sat beside her. We won't lose. You can't know that. No. But I know that whatever happens, we face it together. That's more than most people have. It's not enough. Her voice cracked. If they take the children, nothing will ever be enough again. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Do you remember what I told you the day of the auction about why I bid on you? You said you were tired of watching families be destroyed when you could do something about it. That's part of it. He took her hands in his. The rest is that I saw you, Clara. Not just a widow in trouble, but you. The way you held your children. The way you refused to cry even when you were terrified. The way you looked at the world like you dared it to break you. I felt broken. But you weren't. You aren't. And neither am I anymore. His grip tightened. Whatever happens tomorrow, we've already won something that matters. We've won the chance to be a family. No judge can take that away. Clara leaned into him, letting his warmth seep into her cold places. I love you. The words came out before she could stop them. I know we haven't said it properly, but I do. I love you, Jacob. His breath caught. Clara, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know, in case tomorrow... I love you too. He cut her off, his voice rough. I've loved you since the moment you took over my kitchen and told me I was lucky you weren't letting me burn the house down. Maybe before that. Maybe since you stood on that platform with fire in your eyes and dared anyone to break your family apart. They held each other in the dark kitchen, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their lives, facing one more battle together. We should try to sleep, Clara whispered. We should. Neither of them moved. The hearing was held in the territorial courthouse, a modest building that felt vast and cold, despite the fire burning in the corner stove. Clara sat at a wooden table with Jacob and Thomas Harding. Across the aisle, Victoria Adams was resplendent in an expensive dress, her expression one of practiced concern. Beside her sat a lawyer from Helena, someone she'd clearly paid well to make this journey. The children waited in an anteroom with Henry, all of them instructed to stay calm and let the adults handle things. All except Emma, who sat in the gallery with Will, her face pale but determined. Judge Harrison was older than Clara expected, with white whiskers and tired eyes that had seen too many cases like this one. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat, and began. We're here to assess the welfare of 5 minor children currently residing with Mr. and Mrs. Jacob Mercer. Mrs. Victoria Adams has petitioned this court claiming the children are in danger of moral corruption and would be better served in alternative placement. He looked up. Mrs. Adams, you may present your case. Victoria rose with practiced grace. Your Honor, I come before this court not as an accuser, but as a concerned citizen. These 5 innocent children were sold at auction, sold, Your Honor, like chattel to a man they had never met. A man who, by his own admission, suffers from profound grief that has left him emotionally unstable. Objection. Harding stood. There's no evidence of emotional instability. Overruled. This is an opening statement, not testimony. Continue, Mrs. Adams. Victoria inclined her head. Thank you. Your Honor, the children's mother, Mrs. Thornton, now Mrs. Mercer, was purchased at a debt auction under circumstances that call into question her ability to make free choices. Within weeks of arriving at Mr. Mercer's isolated ranch, she agreed to marry him. One might ask, was this true consent, or the desperate compliance of a woman with no alternatives? Clara's hands clenched under the table. Jacob's hand found hers, squeezed once. I'm not asking this court to punish the Mercers. Victoria's voice dripped false compassion. I'm asking for an evaluation, a chance for qualified observers to spend time with these children and determine whether their current situation is truly in their best interest. She sat down, her expression one of satisfied righteousness. Harding rose slowly. Your Honor, the petitioner would have you believe this case is about children's welfare. It is not. This case is about a woman who cannot accept rejection. Victoria stiffened. Mrs. Adams has pursued Mr. Mercer romantically for 5 years. She has proposed marriage to him on 3 separate occasions and been refused each time. When Mrs. Thornton arrived and Mr. Mercer showed interest in her, Mrs. Adams filed the first of several complaints designed to remove her rival. Objection? Victoria's lawyer was on his feet. This is character assassination. It's relevant background, Your Honor. The petitioner's motivations are central to understanding why this case was brought. Judge Harrison rubbed his forehead. I'll allow it, but stick to facts you can prove, Mr. Harding. Gladly, Your Honor. Harding turned to the gallery. I have statements from Marshal Thomas Briggs, Reverend Augustus Shaw, and Dr. Elias Brennan, all attesting to the excellent care the Mercer children receive. I have financial records showing Mrs. Mercer was paid fair wages for her work establishing that she was an employee, not a captive. And I have one more witness. He looked at Emma. I call Miss Emma Thornton to testify. Emma rose, her face white but her spine straight. She walked to the witness chair with the dignity of someone twice her age. Miss Thornton. Harding's voice was gentle. Can you tell us in your own words what life was like before you came to the Mercer Ranch? Emma took a breath. After my father died, everything fell apart. We lost our house. We lost everything we owned. Then we were taken to the auction. What do you remember about the auction? Men bidding on us. Emma's voice hardened. Talking about splitting us up. One man wanted my mother and me, but not my younger siblings. Another wanted just the little ones. Clara felt tears stream down her face. And what happened then? Mr. Mercer bid $200 for all of us, together. He said families shouldn't be separated. And what happened when you arrived at his ranch? He gave us rooms, fed us, made sure we were warm. Emma's eyes found Jacob's across the room. He let me hate him at first, let me glare at him and question everything he did. He never got angry, never punished me for being suspicious. He just waited until I figured out he was actually decent. Do you feel safe at the Mercer Ranch? Safer than I've felt since my father died. And your siblings? How are they? Emma's voice cracked slightly. Tommy calls him Papa now. He doesn't have nightmares anymore. Hannah loves the chickens. Grace has read more books than she ever did before. And Lily, my sister Lily, barely spoke for months after Papa died. Now she talks to Mr. Mercer about leatherworking. She asks him questions. She laughs sometimes. She turned to face the judge directly. Your Honor, I know what Mrs. Adams is trying to do. She wants to take us away because she's angry that Mr. Mercer chose my mother instead of her. She doesn't care about us. She doesn't even know our names. That's not, Victoria started. I'm not finished. Emma's voice rang out. I'm 14 years old. I've watched my father die. I've stood on an auction block wondering if I'd ever see my mother again. I've been more scared than any child should ever have to be. And I'm telling you right now, in front of God and everyone, the Mercer Ranch is my home. Jacob Mercer is my father now. And if you try to take us away, you'll be doing exactly what you claim you're preventing. You'll be hurting children to satisfy an adult's grudge. Silence fell over the courtroom. Emma held the judge's gaze, unblinking, unflinching. I'm finished now. Her voice was steady. Thank you for listening. She stepped down from the witness stand and walked to where Clara sat. Without a word, Clara opened her arms, and Emma fell into them, finally allowing herself to tremble. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. I think I've heard enough. Victoria rose. Your Honor, I have additional witnesses. I've heard enough, Mrs. Adams. His voice was firm. I've heard a young woman speak with more eloquence and conviction than most adults I encounter. I've reviewed the statements from respected community members, and I've observed you throughout these proceedings. He leaned forward. This court finds no evidence of neglect, abuse, or moral corruption in the Mercer household. The petition is denied. Victoria's face went red. Your Honor. Furthermore, Harrison's voice rose. This court notes that the petition appears to have been filed in bad faith, motivated by personal animosity, rather than genuine concern for children's welfare. Mrs. Adams, I strongly suggest you find more constructive uses for your time and resources. He banged his gavel. Case dismissed. The celebration that evening was unlike anything the ranch had seen. Henry produced fiddle music and something stronger than coffee. Will taught the children a reel that had them laughing and stumbling over their own feet. Even Lily danced her small hand clasped in Grace's, her face bright with joy. Clara stood apart for a moment, watching her family, her whole family now, by law and love both, and felt something she'd forgotten existed. Peace. Jacob found her by the window. Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Mercer. Just thinking about how different everything looked 2 months ago. She leaned into his warmth. I was standing on that platform certain my life was over, certain I'd failed everyone I loved. And now I have more than I ever thought possible. She looked up at him. A home, a husband who loves me, 5 children who are safe and happy. I didn't know how to hope for any of it. Neither did I. His arm tightened around her. I spent 5 years waiting to die, Clara, just going through the motions until I could stop. Then you showed up with your fire and your children and your absolute refusal to be broken. I felt broken, but you weren't. He kissed her forehead. And you showed me I wasn't either. Emma approached them, Hannah tugging at her hand. Mama, Hannah wants to know if we can have cake. There's cake. Henry found some somewhere, or maybe made it. I didn't ask questions. Clara laughed. Then yes, cake for everyone. Hannah whooped and ran off. Emma started to follow, then paused. Jacob. She'd never called him that directly before, always Mr. Mercer or nothing at all. He turned to face her fully. Yes, I was wrong about you. The words came slowly, like she was pulling them from somewhere deep. When you first brought us here, I thought you were just another man looking to take advantage. I thought kindness was always a trap. That's understandable. No, it's not. Emma's voice firmed. It's not understandable because you never gave me any reason to doubt you. You were patient and decent, and you loved my mother the way she deserved to be loved. I should have seen it sooner. Emma. I'm not going to call you Papa. She cut him off. I had a papa. He's dead now. But... She took a breath. But maybe someday I could call you Father, if that's all right. Jacob's eyes glistened. That would be more than all right. Emma nodded once sharply, then turned and disappeared into the chaos of the celebration. Clara wiped tears from her cheeks. I think that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard her say. She's remarkable. Jacob's voice was rough. All of them are. And they're ours now. Ours. Clara tested the word. I like how that sounds. The evening wound down slowly. One by one, the children drifted toward sleep. Hannah, first worn out from dancing, carried to bed by Will. Then Tommy, who'd fallen asleep in Jacob's arms and refused to let go, even in slumber. Lily followed, then Grace, with a book clutched to her chest. Finally Emma, who paused at the bottom of the stairs to look back at her mother. Good night, Mama. Good night, sweetheart. I'm glad we stayed. So am I. Emma smiled a real smile, unguarded and genuine, and disappeared upstairs. Clara and Jacob sat together in the quiet parlor, the fire burning low, the house settling around them. We did it. Clara's voice was soft. We actually did it. We did. Jacob pulled her close. But there's something I need to tell you. Her heart stuttered. What? Victoria isn't going to give up. The judge dismissed this case, but she'll find other ways to make trouble, other angles. She's patient and vindictive, and she has resources. I know. So I've been thinking. He shifted to face her. About how to protect us more permanently. What do you mean? I mean, I want to formally adopt the children. Make them Mercers by law, not just by love. I want our marriage documented in every territory and state, so no one can ever question it. I want our land and assets structured so that Victoria can't use legal tricks to take anything from us." Clara stared at him. "You've been planning this." "I've been preparing for the worst while hoping for the best." His jaw set. "I told you once that I'd burn this territory to the ground before I let anyone take this family from me. I meant it. But I'd rather build walls than burn bridges." Jacob Mercer. Clara reached up to touch his face. "How did I get so lucky?" "Lucky." He laughed. "You were sold at auction to a broken man you'd never met, dragged to a remote ranch in the middle of winter, and forced to prove your fitness as a mother in territorial court. And I ended up with you." She kissed him softly. "That makes me the luckiest woman in Montana." The fire crackled. The wind whispered around the eaves. And two people who'd thought their lives were over discovered they were only beginning. Christmas came and went. Then New Year. Then the slow thaw of early spring. The ranch came alive with new growth calves born. Gardens planted, plans made for expansion. The children thrived, growing stronger and more confident with each passing week. Emma began helping with the bookkeeping, showing an aptitude for numbers that surprised everyone. Grace started teaching the younger children to read, sharing her love of stories. Lily's quiet voice grew stronger. Hannah's laugh rang out across the ranch yard every day. And Tommy followed Jacob everywhere, learning to be a rancher from the man he proudly called Papa. Clara found herself pregnant in April. She told Jacob on a morning when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom, when the air smelled of hope and possibility. "A baby." His voice cracked. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." He swept her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "Clara, my God. Clara. I know it's soon. I know there's so much uncertainty." "It's perfect." He held her face in his hands. "It's absolutely perfect." The news spread through the household like wildfire. Hannah demanded to know if she could name the baby. Grace immediately began reading books about infant care. Lily asked if she could sew something for it. Tommy wanted to know if it would be a boy or a girl, and whether it would be old enough to play with by Christmas. Only Emma hung back. Clara found her that evening sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "You're quiet." Clara settled beside her daughter. "I thought you'd be happy." "I am happy." Emma's voice was soft. "It's just..." "Just what?" "It feels like everything's really different now. Like we're really a new family, not just people living together." "Is that bad?" "No." Emma turned to face her mother. "It's good. It's really good. I wanted to hold on to it for a minute. Remember what it felt like. Because I know things will change again, and I want to remember this moment when everything was perfect." Clara pulled her daughter close. "Things will change," she agreed. "They always do. But some things stay constant. I will always love you. Jacob will always protect you. Your brothers and sisters will always need you. And the new baby. We'll be lucky to have you as a big sister." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think Papa would be glad. My first Papa, I mean. I think he'd be glad we found Jacob. Found this life." Clara's eyes burned. "I think so too." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, mother and daughter past and future merging into present. The baby came in December, exactly 1 year after Clara had stood on an auction block facing the end of everything. A daughter. They named her Hope. When Clara held her for the first time, surrounded by her family, Jacob beaming, Emma holding Tommy back from climbing onto the bed, Grace reciting facts about newborns, Lily watching with wonder, Hannah bouncing with excitement, she understood something she'd forgotten in all the years of struggle and loss. This was what survival looked like. Not just enduring, not just getting through, but building something beautiful from the wreckage. Finding joy in unexpected places. Choosing love over fear, hope over despair, family over solitude. She's perfect, Jacob whispered, one finger tracing Hope's tiny cheek. She is. Clara looked at her husband, at her children, at the life they'd built together. Everything is. Outside, snow fell softly on the ranch, the same ranch that had seemed so forbidding a year ago, now warm with light and laughter and love. Clara Thornton had been sold at auction with 5 hungry children and no future. Clara Mercer held her newborn daughter in a house full of family, surrounded by people who loved her, looking forward to a lifetime of possibility. Same woman, different world. And she had built it herself, one stubborn choice at a time. The fire crackled. The children laughed. Jacob's hand found hers and held on tight. This was home. This was family. This was everything she'd never dared to hope for. Everything she'd almost lost. Everything that mattered. And nothing, not gossip, not threats, not the cruelty of small-minded people, would ever take it away again. She was Clara Mercer now, wife, mother, survivor. And her story was only just beginning.